Now, a special presentation from Fox 17 News.
Have you had the talk?
That talk, having the delicate conversation with the people you love about their end-of-life wishes.
The doctor says, do you want the feeding tube? Because then we can see how she progresses over the next year.
For months, Fox 17 has been working with local organizations to arm you with the knowledge to have one of the most important talks of your life before it's too late.
It's your life, and you know, in a way, it is your death.
We witnessed raw emotion, uncomfort, tears,
Carrie.
and laughter. Now, after our series of reports in the month of February, we unite them with a panel of experts to answer your questions, to prepare you for the talk.
Have you had the talk?
Have you had the talk?
It's something you need to do.
Here's Michelle DeSelms at the Fox 17 studios.
And thank you for joining us for this special presentation from Fox 17 News, a town hall meeting culminating a series of reports all month long on end-of-life decisions, a topic with far-reaching implications, one that will ultimately impact everyone. I am joined tonight by a panel of experts to talk about how to start the end-of-life discussion, as well as some of the legalities, the money, and the spiritual aspects of this topic. Also with us tonight, Fox 17's Yana Falzone, who has been helping produce our Have You Had the Talk series. She documented the talks of 3 West Michigan families for us throughout this month. She is joined by a live studio audience who you will hear from throughout this half hour. But before we get to our guests, for many of us, the topic of death is not something we're comfortable talking about. Its suddenness can scare us. The conversation can bring out some of our deepest emotions. Since we started this series, we've received many emails from a variety of viewers. One of them was from a Holland man who recently lost the love of his life.
She kind of was the glue that kept us together.
47-year-old Jody Uren of Holland was energetic, always on the go, and her family was always number one.
You can't do anything about it. It's just, you have to go on, put one foot in front of the other, and make the best of what you can.
Last year, Jody passed away at just 47 years of age, leaving behind her husband of 27 years, 2 kids, 1 grandchild, and another on the way.
She was diagnosed with the adenocarcinoma in September 18th, and she passed away in October.
Ivan says Jody's cancer progressed rapidly, changing life as they knew it in just a month.
An arrow in the heart. It was just devastating.
Ivan says the two never really had any end-of-life discussion prior to Jody's diagnosis, and he never got the chance to after, as things happened so quickly.
I knew God had a plan, and I asked God before if it was going to be His will to take her peacefully and fast. I did not want her to suffer.
Ivan says he's learned that it is just never too early to start talking after facing a reality he never imagined happening so soon in their lives.
Life is going to throw you a curveball, and you got to be prepared for it. It's just something that nobody wants to talk about. And like I said, we never had the opportunity to sit down and talk and say, what do you want?
And that's exactly why we are here tonight, so that everybody can be prepared. Let me introduce our panel to you tonight. Dr. Michael Paletta, Vice President of Medical Affairs and Executive Director at Hospice of Michigan Institute. Sister Myra Bergman, she is a Mercy Health Regional Vice President of Mission Integration. And Susan Mueller, a social worker with Hospice. Of course, the first step to having the talk is actually getting up the nerve to bring it up. We're going to send it out over to Deanna now, because I know you have some questions already for this panel that we want to get to tonight. Deanna?
Yeah, Michelle, here in the audience we have some family members that we've profiled over the past 3 weeks. One of those is Barbara. She's been chosen as her parents' patient advocate. And, you know, this is a talk that you've had now for some time. You're continuing this conversation. But is there anything as you continue this process that you kind of want to bring up to the panel at this point?
Sure. It's really been incredible, the outpouring of feedback on this subject. And what I'm so excited about is that it's actually becoming an ongoing conversation for other people. However, it's difficult to start the conversation. So I'd like to direct this to Dr. Paletta. Doctor, can you give us some ideas of how we can help people to start the conversation, especially in circumstances where maybe there are some preconceived notions about why the topic would come up, whether it be money or some self-serving reason, rather than just simply being able to have the talk?
Well, they are very difficult conversations to have because the subject is still taboo. And if the older folks bring up the topic, they want to talk about the will and testament and advance directives. The younger folks will say, well, why do you want to talk about that? We don't need to talk about that. There's time. If the adult children of the older folks bring up the topic that, hey, Dad, we need to get the will, we need to get some of these things set down in paper, the older person may say, why are they so anxious? Do they just want the money? Is this a... So both groups have barriers to an open conversation. The best way for some families is going to be to link the idea of advance directives and medical decision making with their will and their testament. Most families are not upset at the idea of saying, listen, we have a home, we have a business, we have real estate, we have other assets to be dispersed. At the same time that they're preparing those documents and making those decisions, we can tack on the medical piece, which is who's going to speak for me if I become ill, my patient advocate, and should I do an actual advance directive? Should I get a form, or should I put some things down on paper saying what I do and don't want if I become gravely ill? And so bundled with an overall future planning, it might be a little less scary for families.
And that's important to start ahead of time, not when there is a medical emergency.
Exactly.
To start now, to know what your elderly parents are taking, what medications they're taking, what they're doing, because a lot of times that comes as a surprise to people. I see, Sister, that you're nodding about that.
Exactly. I think there's some practical things that kind of occur in life too that kind of can initiate a conversation. For example, perhaps you visited a loved one in the hospital and you come home and you say, I sure don't want to go through that. Or perhaps you've been at a funeral, or some of those human experiences that you just naturally start talking about, gosh, what about me? Or what would I want? And that sometimes can be a catalyst, along with what Doctor is saying, of saying, well, you know what, maybe we should start talking about this a little bit. And sometimes it divorces it a bit from yourself to talk about it with someone else initially, and then eventually it comes back to, what about me? Because many times when we are visiting someone or we see someone that we love who's ill, no matter what we say, it's really about us. What's going to happen to me if I'm in that situation?
Yes.
So I think there are multiple ways of using just our natural everyday stuff along with the practical things of will and those kinds of things that can initiate this kind of conversation.
With kids, we call that teachable moments. I mean,
Teachable
I think as
moments
adults, we
is a
probably
very
need
good way of
teachable moments
yes.
as well. Yeah. All right, let's go
Right.
back to Deanna now with another question.
Yeah, Michelle, I'm here with Mary Harmon, and you actually made the decision to reach out to your 5 children, one of them, Amy, right in front of you. Do you have any question for the panelists when it comes to that?
Yes, my question has to do with if we have everything in order and then death becomes imminent. And that's when I think all the raw emotions begin to surface. And they're disagreeing, even though they have agreed on all of the decisions of the one who is extremely ill, critically ill. When would be a good time to maybe bring in an outside person to help the family, revisit what the patient wants and to help them maybe understand what they're going through at this time? I was maybe going to direct this to Sister Myra.
Well, that is a situation because I spend a lot of my life in the healthcare hospital world. That is a situation that is very, very common, because no matter what we think when we're not in the situation of actually the moment of dying, the emotion and the reality of that is a whole different experience. And you are right, Mary, that I think it is clearly important to have someone, whether it's a pastor or someone who can facilitate, sometimes it's a social worker, someone who can facilitate that difference. And most of the time it's around feelings and emotion, not so much about what the individual wants for their loved one, but what's it going to mean to me. And so it has to be addressed. So I think it is important. It's part of the spiritual realities of life that we need to deal with the fact that letting go at dying is very tough, no matter what talk we've had in advance. This is the end point, at least on this earth, and that is very, very difficult. So don't hesitate to seek a resource. And usually I would say it's someone perhaps that's not part of the family.
Yes.
Because,
Takes out the emotion.
because they're already in an emotional state.
Yeah.
You need someone, I don't mean objective in the sense of not caring,
Yes.
but someone who's not directly in the family situation, who can understand, who's been used to facilitating these kinds of things, but in fact can help to move that process along, and that helps the other care providers as well, do what they need to do.
And that's what Susan was talking about, how important that is, because when they come to you, they are at that end stage, and you say that's very important.
They are, but I'd also like to say that it is never too early, no matter what, to have an informational visit about Hospice of Michigan. I'm with Hospice of Michigan, so I'm always going to say Hospice of Michigan, but to have a hospice informational visit, because most of the time people really are very confused about what that is. When they hear the term, they think their loved one's gone in 24, 48 hours.
Well, could you explain a little bit, because I do think that people don't understand.
And the truth is, I'm not saying that some aren't, but unfortunately they come to us very late. But if we can get somebody that's, earlier a little bit, they've decided not to pursue treatment, or even if they're thinking about it, it's okay to have an informational visit, just so they know what hospice care is all about. The advance directives are wonderful to have prior. By the time the folks come to me, we're really at a different stage, and I'm then more talking about do not resuscitate orders, which are a very important part of advance directives.
Right. Yeah, very important.
So,
and I think, Michelle, too, along with that is the ability for folks like Susan and those to deal with what does this death moment look like, so people are not totally surprised by that. This is a scary time.
Yes.
And so if you have a sense of what you're really about, that may help some of the emotional distress. At least it will be there, but it will not be as overwhelming.
Yeah, good. Great advice. All right, Deanna, another question?
Yeah, going off of kind of what Sister said, Paul Collins, you have a question kind of in reference to that. Kind of a tough question, but a very important one.
So one of the things that I think is going on that we have to really deal with is the hostilities in families that don't talk to each other. And one example that we had in our neighborhood, there was a man by the name of Mel Fisher, and we had assumed Mel had no family. And Mel was probably about 87 years old, so my wife and I adopted him, took care of him, watched over him. We left, we made sure that somebody went over and fed him all the time. And I got a call, and it was an attorney. He said, you need to come down to Mel's house. Mel died. And I was just wondering why an attorney was calling me. So anyway, I went down there, and all of a sudden I saw a family. And I asked him, I didn't know he had a family. Where have you been for 5 years? And come to find out, he left his house to me. And so his family assumed that my wife and I did that with him because we wanted his house. Well, it wasn't about that. And I ended up giving the house to his church. But we never knew he had a family.
And I think that's, one of the biggest things is trying to get over those hurdles and just get the conversation started. And I mean, have you guys faced anything like that as experts, kind of working in this field?
Well, it's certainly not unusual to have. It's not unusual to have estrangement within a family, and in our modern era, with so many broken families and so many single parents. So many extended families living either together or separately. There are so many dynamic relationships that change over time. Certainly a serious illness has an impact on those relationships. And if those relationships are not healthy when the person is healthy, they're certainly not going to improve when the person becomes ill. And so those of us who do end-of-life care are frequently in a situation of, before any decisions can be made, we have to identify the players and make peace and have a care planning conference where everyone agrees that they're going to set aside their personal differences and do their best to act in the best interest of the dying person. And if we can all agree on that, we're going to do what's best for Mom. The other things can be sorted out later, and sometimes we're able to do that.
And sometimes not. And we just have to go with what we
do the best you can.
You do the best we can with what we have. A lot of it is just about education, but my experience too is a lot of people think all of a sudden somebody comes to the end of their life, and maybe if they weren't maybe the nicest person for the way they look, that all of a sudden they're going to have this, what I call the mea culpa moment. And but people become more of who they are, you know, not less. So we just do the best, and we deal with whatever comes before us.
Yes. And I must add that some of the most rewarding aspects of what we do is to have a situation where you can bring a fractured family together. And if not heal some of those rifts, at least improve them to the point where between the team and the family working together, you can have a controlled, dignified, peaceful end of life, and then let the combat start afterwards.
Can I say one more thing too? Because since I know the Have You Had the Talk is about the advance directives, but the other thing is so important for what it is that I do, our final plans, which I know are very difficult for people to talk about, but I can't stress. Memorial service, final plans, whatever that may be, whether it's, you know, burial, cremation, the laws in the state of Michigan. That's a lot of where I come in and educate families. I cannot stress that if you do that for a family, you know, for your loved one, it is absolutely a gift.
That is something to think about. Deanna, back to you.
Yeah, I'm here with Mark, Barbara's husband, and you went through this talk with your father and, of course, with her parents, so you've kind of seen both ends of it, and, you know, you kind of have a question that goes along with that as well.
I do have a question. I don't know exactly who to direct this question to, but I'm sure you all might have an answer. What happens if the elderly person doesn't want to acknowledge that death is even in the future? I mean, we all feel, well, I'm not going to die, you know, I'm going to live forever, but we all know that's not true. What if that person does not want to do even the will, the testament, the trust, anything like that? How do you approach that person?
Yes, absolutely.
I would like to take this one. You know, I don't do it. That in our business is called denial. And I'm only going by my experience, my 12 years of experience with hospice care. I think we think denial is a bad thing. It really isn't, to me. It is the easiest defense for human beings to use to handle unimaginable situations. A lot of it just does take care of itself. You know, what is the saying? Lead them to water and you can't make them drink. You just can't. All we do is educate gently and do the best we can, but things tend to fall into place one way or the other. There's just, you can't force it, that's for sure.
I would agree with that. I think there's a couple of things that I would say along with that is that, first of all, to respect where the individual is coming from is first and foremost. And that's basically what you were saying as well. I think you may be able to somehow get around the death, the dying issue by asking. We all know that our life, you know, is going to take different turns. What's really important to you as you age a bit or as you deal with illness or disease? I mean, that's a reality that you can. So what is it that we can do, or how is it that you would like to have your life lived, given the fact of such and such? That takes it out of the dying piece, but puts it more into how are you still going to live with whatever this time is that you have. And sometimes that helps people do some planning, and Ms. Susan, is it Susan?
Yes.
That says, gets them into another frame of mind without having to deal with whatever is disgusting for
Boy,
them.
that seems very helpful, very helpful.
And it's a
Michelle,
different,
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
Esther. I've had some success too with the approach that you may not want to make these decisions or think about it.
Right.
But if you don't do it, your daughter is going to have to.
Yes.
Yeah, that's another
And you
point.
have an opportunity to take that burden away from her.
Yes.
If you can at least give us some guidance here, it will be much easier for her to make some of those
Yes.
decisions. And so if you won't do it for yourself, maybe do it for your daughter.
Oh, that's great.
And it sometimes works.
Yeah.
And if all else fails, don't worry, it will take care of itself.
Yeah, it will.
All right, Deanna.
Good advice,
Yeah.
definitely. Brad, who's Director of Mission Services, has some questions for our panelists.
Thank you very much. Just a question, maybe it's a little bit more from a logistics standpoint, but even once you've had some of that discussion, particularly if you're out of town and you're the health advocate, or what actually happens if someone goes into the hospital suddenly? I mean, do you have to bring your paperwork with you, or how does the hospital or doctor even know, that you're the health advocate?
We recommend that multiple copies of the documents be prepared, some kept at home. Certainly, the person who's designated as the patient advocate should have copies. If there's a family attorney, they should have copies. The doctor should have copies. And there should be some mobile copies that could be brought to the hospital in the event of a sudden illness. I'll tell you also that in the state of Michigan, as well as some other states, there is a movement called a POST, or POST, Physician Orders for the Scope of Treatment. That's an electronic form of getting that advance directive and those final instructions into an electronic database, so that no matter what hospital or what facility someone goes to, they'll go into the website, bring up that person's advance directives, and so it will follow them in that way. And so a piece of paper doesn't have to make the trip. It'll be an electronic transfer, and that is getting a lot of traction in the state of Michigan as we speak.
That's great. Oh, that's good to know. Is that, you like that?
I actually want to add something. Many people have, they've gone to a lawyer for their financial, and then they add a medical. Please know that the hospital, the hospice, any of the healthcare providers just need the few pages that gives it the medical. They're not going to try to, through this whole, so that's why I tend to ask my folks to just show it to me. I can usually go right to it and say, this is what I need, and it's just a few pages.
Good. Or hopefully,
and make multiple copies of
something
that.
else. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, good. Deanna, over to you.
Thanks, Michelle. I think there's a lot of questions about that, just what kind of documents people need, what needs to be in writing, so definitely some good answers there. Marcy with Hospice of Michigan, you have a few questions?
Sure. For the panel, there may be some people in watching this now that had the talk or didn't have the talk recently or a long time ago, and were in the position where they had to make decisions, and they may have some, maybe some guilt over that, or they're not sure if they've made the right decisions. Is there anything that you can share with them that may help them that, yes, they did make the best decisions possible?
I'm just going to say one very simple thing that I've said often to my family members. I go, have you done this out of love? The decision that you've made, was it out of love? Did you love your loved one, whoever that may be? And they'll, yes. And I go, then it isn't wrong. And so that's, I just have it be simple.
Yes.
That's me.
The other thing I would say is that, at least as I have thought about my own advance directives, what's more important to me is to be able to tell those that I love and love me what's important to me in life, because that doesn't change. I may or may not ultimately have a ventilator for a while, but I know what my life means and what the relationships mean, etc. So those things, along with whatever other medical kinds of decisions you might want to add, are probably as important, because those don't change. If I really want say that my life is about my relationships with my children and my grandchildren, and I want to be able to have a life that I can relate to them, that won't change. What it may mean in terms of medical care might, but not that. So if you add both of those in your planning, and people know this is what really is important to me in my life, that helps people who are, whether it's the advocate or the family members trying to sort through, say, like what you were saying earlier, it's like, well, I do know that my mother really cares about X, Y, Z. That at least is sure, and that can help move a conversation a bit.
Yeah, and it's all about getting it started.
And it's important to remember that those documents are not carved in stone.
That's right.
So they can be amended, they can be added to or changed.
And should be.
We recommend to people that they do an annual review. Maybe on their birthday each year, or at Thanksgiving when the family's all together. Dust them off, get them out, look at them. Is this still the way we want it to be? And if not, make the changes. So that can be done at any time.
All right, thank you. Well, right now, you can go to fox17online.com to collect forms and information that you need to begin having the talk. You can also watch all of the stories that we produced in the month of February in conjunction with hospice. And please share your stories about having the talk with Fox 17. Just send us an email. So many people have done that already. As we wrap up, Fox 17 News would like to thank several key players who helped us put together the talk series, as well as this town hall meeting. Of course, we couldn't have produced this without the help of Hospice of Michigan, Murphy Media, Aquinas College, and the Catholic Information Center. Thank you, panel, for being here tonight. Thank you for the audience. Here from the Fox 17 studios today, go out there, please, everyone, and have the talk.